So this is going to be quite a difficult video to do to evade the censorship on Gulag Tube, but I'm going to go for it anyway. So you might have to be a little bit more patient to try to understand what I'm going to get at. So first of all, I'm going to show you some pictures about a historic event that we've been told about. I would say that this event has been described to us by the mainstream media for maybe the last 15 years. Before that, I certainly can't remember being taught about it at school. Anyway, I'll show the images now and I'll talk over them. A big lie is a gross distortion or misrepresentation of the truth, primarily used as a political propaganda technique. The expression was first used by I'm going to have to use code here, the German moustache man in his book, the one that he wrote in prison in 1925, to describe how people could be induced to believe so colossal a lie because they would not believe that somebody could have the impudence to distort the truth so famously. The guy who was responsible for propaganda inside National Socialist Germany in the 1930s, Joseph, the one that begins with G, he also put forth a theory which has come to be commonly associated with this expression, the big lie. And this was published in a German magazine on the 12th of January 1941. And basically he was accusing the British, the Anglo-Saxon part of the world of using or relying heavily on this technique of the big lie. So he said, the essential English leadership secret does not depend on particular intelligence. Rather, it depends on a remarkably stupid thick-headedness. The English follow the principle that when one lies, one should lie big and stick to it. They keep up their lies even at the risk of looking ridiculous. So, to be honest with you, I think we can see many big lies that have been told obviously since March 2020, but now in retrospect, there was some pretty big ones told, throughout most of our lives. Another more well-known quote from the National Socialist propaganda minister is as follows. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. The lie can be maintained only for such a time as the state can shield the people from the political, economic, and/or military consequences of the lie. It thus becomes vitally important for the state to use all of its powers to repress dissent, for the truth is the mortal enemy of the lie, and thus by extension, the truth is the greatest enemy of the state. So back with you now, and just a few more thoughts. Looking at those images, the coverings, the slave muzzles that those people were wearing, they all looked like super clean, didn't they? They must have had some very effective washing liquids or washing methods back in those days, or they certainly must have worn new slave muzzles every half an hour or something. But anyway, this Spanish flu thing, I can't really remember it being taught to me at school at all. Nor are there, I remember, in the last sort of 10-15 years, there seems to be a lot of noise made about the Spanish flu, the BBC saying stuff like more people died of the Spanish flu in 1918 than did during the 4 years of World War One in total. Now, if you go to Britain or other countries like France, you'll see all over the place memorials to people that died in wars, and yet you see no memorials at all to people that maybe brave doctors or something that gave their lives treating people who had Spanish flu, or there doesn't seem to be any permanent record of this event, this Spanish flu. Now, I don't know about you, but that strikes me as being strange. Things that make you go, as they say. One of the nice things about living in Finland is that I finally got all my books out again after them being in storage for about 15 years. And so I thought to myself, let's check out this Spanish flu thing, because when I was at school, I studied economic history. And I also studied economics as an undergraduate as well. So I found two books. I'm going to show them to you now. And both of them sort of cover the period when this Spanish flu was supposed to have happened. So I'm going to show you these books now. So the first book is the one that I had for my O-level economic history course. The Age of Industrial Expansion, second edition, written by a guy called A.J. Holland. British economic and social history since 1700. It was published in 1975, if you can see that. And this is what's great about these old books, is that it's a snapshot of how things were. Well, wow, a long time ago now, like 40 odd years ago. And first thing that jumps out really, I guess, is just the difference in the standard of writing, This would be probably more like an A-level or maybe an even first-year undergrad book. So he says here, this is a section on Malthus. He's according to this guy, he said, Malthus foresaw a shortage of agricultural land and considered that disease and famine would follow if nothing was done to check the growth of population. Among other things, he suggested that people should not marry at an early age. Well, high house prices are doing that for us, or they have done over the last 20, 30 years. And that they should be aware of the dangers of too large a family. Malthus's book was published 3 years before the census, which appeared to give further point to his argument. Britain's population was growing quite rapidly at that stage. Anyway, what's quite interesting is later on in this chapter, he sort of considers death rates and what can cause a death rate to go up. So although this is relating but to Malthus's times, this guy, A.J. Holland, he basically says each age finds its own killer. In our day, for example, the cigarette and the motor car. The bubonic plague, which had decimated the population in the Middle Ages, disappeared from England after the fire of London in 1666. And then later on in the book, there's also a chapter on the Great War, so it goes into this in a lot of detail. So for example, some really juicy stuff about the government's expenditure and tax income during those times. So you can see they were running a huge fiscal deficit during the Great War. Much bigger than, say, that's been happening even in recent times. So it goes into this in quite a bit of detail, the economic results of the war. So obviously the UK lost a lot of manpower. And then, you would expect a section, wouldn't you, on the economic impacts of this Spanish flu pandemic, the very first one. But, there's nothing in here at all. Which is, as I say, it's a thing that makes you go, So we're just checking the index here. Look, we've got an entry for Spain, but we haven't got an entry for the Spanish flu. There's a reference for page 128. Let's have a quick look at that. What's going on there? Yeah, so nothing there about the Spanish flu. It's basically about trade prior to the First World War. Round again. Yeah, so for me, I just think this is like rather odd, isn't it? This massive event that we've been told about for the last, we only really heard about it like for the last 15 years. This Spanish flu thing, this first ever pandemic. This guy, A.J. Holland, it's not featuring in his radar, is it? It'd be quite interesting to look at a GCSE textbook and see whether it is featuring. My guess is that it would be, and it's probably only been featuring in books over the last 10, 15 years, 20 years tops. This one is quite a famous one, a more famous one. So Industry and Empire by Eric Hobsbawm, some might say famous, I would say notorious Marxist. So this was a first year text, because I also did a first year paper when I did my economics degree in economic history. So this goes all the way up to like late 1960s. So again, we can actually have a look through here, and there's no entry for the Spanish flu, which is interesting, isn't it? Yeah, Spanish Succession War, Spain, nothing about the Spanish flu here. Quite turning the camera around, it would be interesting to look whether this has been updated and whether a section on the Spanish flu, because it must have devastated the British economy at the time. If we're now told that more people died of the Spanish flu than died in World War One, then that huge loss of manpower must have affected the economy, to the extent that somebody like Eric Hobsbawm, must have, wanted to write about that. Surely it would have been significant enough to write about it. So, this is what I'm saying. I'm just asking some questions. It's very, very interesting, isn't it? That there doesn't really seem to be any physical signs of any memorials to people that died of the Spanish flu. Certainly, I don't remember being taught about it at school. Do you remember being taught about it at school? I'm 58. My textbooks that I had from school, if this textbook is about economic history, and it's going from 1700 right through to like mid 20th century, 1970, surely an event of that significance would have found its way into this textbook. Now, the other thing as well that you can say about books, physical books like these, I'll just turn the camera around, is that they can't be altered, can they? These books are incredibly valuable because, unlike something that's digital, you can go in and just change an article online and no one's the wiser. No one knows that you've edited it. These things are in my possession. As long as I'm alive, these won't be altered. I can tell you that these are my books that I had in the late 70s, and this was what was being taught to young people back then. This is definitive proof. So make of that what you will. I think it's very, very, at the very least, I find it very strange. At worst, well, I'm not going to say what perhaps, if I was a betting man, what I would really say if I had to come down on one side of the argument or not, because I don't want to say what I really think, because I'm just going to get censored. And also that in itself will tell you something, won't it? Like the fact that I would be censored for saying that a certain historical event that we've been only told about in the last 10, 15 years, if I cast any kind of dispersion on that, whether it really happened or not, this video would be removed. So for me, that type of censorship makes me suspicious. I think, what's going on here? Am I being sold a pup here? It's interesting, isn't it? Also, what's quite interesting too is that this Spanish flu thing only really started hitting the airwaves, the BBC, and going into school history books once all of the people that were alive or would have been alive around 1918, a couple of years after that, those people were all dead and buried, weren't they, by the turn of the century. So that basically, I think, gave them, well, if you were trying to do something you shouldn't do, then you certainly wouldn't want eyewitnesses saying that never happened. And basically, those people wouldn't be around by the year 2000. So then, the road would be clear, wouldn't it? Anyway, so that's all I want to say about that. So God bless.